Happy Friday, everyone. Thanks for joining us today on this edition of Business Daily. I'm Lee Ji-yoon in Seoul. We have a lot on our plate today, so let's get started with a look at today's highlights. Korea's low-cost carriers and global routes topped 20% last month thanks to growing demand for cheaper air tickets and expanded capacity. From China's stock market rout to Brexit and Donald Trump's presidential election win in the U.S., 2016 was a year full of major economic and business news. We take a look at the main events that made headlines this year. But first, Korea's consumer prices spiked 1.3% on year in December, logging their fourth straight month of growth above 1%. According to Statistics Korea, this comes on the back of rising fresh produce prices. And compared to the previous month, inflation was down 0.2 percentage point from 1.5%. Core inflation, which excludes volatile oil and food prices, surged 1.2% compared to the year before. For the entire year, the consumer price index climbed 1%, up 0.3 percentage point from last year. The Korean economy may continue to face many headwinds in the new year, but the finance minister says these difficulties can be overcome through unity. Minister Yoo Il-ho shared these thoughts in an address ahead of the new year on Friday. During the speech, he said there will be many domestic and global changes, like Korea's structural transition in society and industrial sectors, as well as the incoming Trump administration in the U.S., which will continue to fuel uncertainty. Despite this, Yoo said the Korean people and the government have shown their ability to come together and overcome hardships, and that spirit will carry over to next year. Yoo added that the government will do its best to implement policies to solve the low birth rate issue, as well as revive consumption and investor sentiment while stabilizing people's livelihoods. The Korean government is now able to take action against Chinese fishing boats found to have installed illegal equipment, like steel bars that prevent coast guards from raiding the vessels. This is according to a new agreement reached between the two countries at a joint fisheries committee on Thursday. Seoul's Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries says Korea is now also able to remove illegal fishing gear, such as fixed nets set up in the country's exclusive economic zones after notifying Beijing. Chinese maritime officers will also be deployed to the de facto inter-Korea maritime border regularly in the West Sea. The specifics will be decided in a follow-up meeting. Now, November is not usually a month of travel, but the share of Korea's budget carriers topped 20% on international routes last month. And these cheaper airlines are now increasing their presence on flights within Korea. Our Kimchi has this report.
Korea's low-cost carriers are increasing their presence in the skies. According to the Transport Ministry, budget carriers accounted for over 22% of international routes in November. The figure has been on a steady rise over the past few years, on the back of growing demand for cheap tickets and the airlines adding to their fleets. Currently, there are 6 low-cost carriers operating in Korea, including Jeju Air and Jin Air. The country's 2 largest flight carriers, Korean Air and Asiana Airlines, saw their combined market share at about 44% last month. That's down from over 48% in the same month last year. On domestic routes, it's a similar story. Budget carriers made up more than 56%, outpacing flagship carriers, which accounted for about 43%. Meanwhile, the total number of passengers stood at 8.3 million in November, up almost 9% from a year ago. Of the figure, international route passengers came to 5.8 million, a jump of 11% on year. The ministry expects the number of passengers to continue to climb in December due to the holiday peak season. However, it cited the slow global economic recovery as a negative factor. Kim Min-ji, Business Daily.
Kimchi, honey butter, wasabi, and green tea. Now the list goes on. The Korean snack market has been overflowing with the number of new flavors as food producers are eagerly searching for the flavor that would set the next big trend. So, what's the most popular flavor these days? Our Lee Ju-young tells us more.
The craze in novel snack flavors first started with honey butter, then moved on to bananas, and now it's green tea. At supermarkets across the nation, green tea-flavored snacks have emerged as the new favorite.
The green tea flavor is new and the color is different, so it makes me want to eat it.
According to Korea's largest supermarket, E-Mart, the sales index of its green tea chocolate-covered pies in October have surged 8-fold in just a month. Food manufacturer Lotte Confectionery says it's also racked up about $2.5 million in October from these 5 goods, rising every month from $910,000 in July. While these delectable snacks are being snatched up for now, experts say this may just be a temporary phenomenon as far as popularity goes. This was most notable with the Honeybutter craze, which caused a sensation back in 2014. After building a second factory to keep up with skyrocketing demand, its popularity suddenly died down, causing the company to fall significantly short of its sales expectations of $165 million a year. The banana craze, which followed shortly after, also saw instant success, but quickly fizzled out in less than a year.
Consumers have much more exposure in a short period of time, so they get tired. Once they've tasted it, it's enough for them.
Experts say with consumer tastes changing ever so rapidly, manufacturers need to be more flexible when it comes to sales strategies to better meet the demands of fickle consumers. Lee Ju-young, Business Daily.
And it's time for our final installment of Global Business News for the year. For that, we're joined by our Eunice Kim in the studio. Hello, Eunice.
Happy Friday.
All right, so what a year it's been. I mean, we have just one more full day before we usher in year 2017.
Yeah.
And we can't let you go without a look back on some key events, right? And that stands us to follow us into 2017.
You're absolutely right. And did you know, June, we are now just about 3 weeks away from a Donald Trump inauguration. From a Trump presidency to the first country to vote itself outside of the EU, the year surprised with black swan events. Here's 2016 in review.
Do you remember the earthquake?
The Chinese stock market pulled the plug on trading again for the second time in just 3 days.
Amid the global stock rout, investors here in Korea are also shouldering painful losses.
Now, Korea's stock trading volume keeps plunging this year as investors remain hesitant given the ongoing uncertainties at home and abroad.
Yup, that route. China's stock market is hit with massive sell-offs from the first trading day of the year, forcing authorities to halt trading amid plummeting shares as the reverberations spread to other global indices. Throughout the course of the year, the Shanghai Composite fails to recover its losses. At its peak in late November, the main bourse is down nearly 8% from the December before. It ends the year at the lowest point since 2011. Then a quake of another kind. In the summer, across the European continent, UK citizens go to the polls. The referendum vote that many had dismissed as destined to fail does just the opposite. Nearly 52% of British voters opt to leave the European Union, leading to Prime Minister David Cameron's resignation as a cloud of uncertainty moves in over not just Europe's second largest economy, but also the Union itself. The sterling drops to a 31-year low against the greenback in October, amid questions on when the Theresa May government would be ready to trigger Article 50. But the year has another black swan event on the calendar, and it delivers. At the U.S. presidential elections, Hillary Clinton walks away with 2.8 million more popular votes. But America's unique electoral college system hands the victory to first-time politician Donald Trump. Markets rally amid improving economic indicators and the billionaire president-elect's promises for deregulation, tax cuts, and infrastructure spending. What a Donald Trump presidency really holds, though, is anybody's guess.
What he said and what he can do may well be very separate things indeed. So actually delivering on the promises is going to be his most difficult. And at that stage, the markets get disappointed, and that's where your bubble then goes bang.
Indeed. And we'll soon find out whether this Trump rally over in the U.S. will actually end up being a Trump bubble. But what we'll be most concerned about, of course, is his policies. In fact, this was reflected in a recent survey by the central bank.
Right. So the Bank of Korea did a survey of 204 decision makers here in Korea who deal with global affairs, and these were their top concerns. This year, the top three came out to be Brexit, Trump's election, and the protracted slow growth in the global economy. And if you look at their top concerns in the new year, Trump is on top, followed by a weakening European Union and the U.S. Fed's policy normalization.
Now, we've already talked a lot about Donald Trump and the advisors that he's surrounding himself with, but the U.S. economy he will take on starting January 21st is a very strong one.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And it was certainly it will be a much stronger economy than the incumbent President Barack Obama took on, you'll remember, 10 years ago when the world was dealing with a financial crisis. As a matter of fact, just last week, U.S. third quarter GDP figures, which were already strong at 3.2%, were revised up to 3.5% at final reading. Trump has been, of course, preaching jobs, 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 but he's actually walking into quite a strong economy when it comes to jobless rates, 4.6% jobless rate economy, which is better than the reality that 5 of the prior 6 presidents faced when they started their terms.
And 2017 is set to be another year of presidential elections, Korea notwithstanding. But we have some key races coming up in Europe, right?
Right, and this, of course, as we've been seeing this wave of populism that really came to the fore with the Brexit vote referendum results, as well as the U.S. presidential race. In fact, countries accounting for some 40% of the EU economy will be heading to the polls next year. Now, in February, Germans will be voting for their next president, and in March, the Dutch elect their lawmakers, followed by the French presidential election, which kicks off in April. And we will be rounding out the year with the German parliamentary elections in September, which could determine whether Chancellor Angela Merkel, who of course has been really leading the European Union, will be able to clinch her 4th term, or whether we'll be seeing new leadership altogether.
Well, definitely a lot of major events coming up in the new year as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for the wrap up, and I'll be seeing you next year.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. And that wraps up our last edition of Business Daily for this year. Hope you all have a very happy new year, and we'll be seeing you right back here at the same time, same place for your Business Daily in 2017. Thanks for watching, and again, Happy New Year.